commission headed by Special Attorney Mueller, he can use this treaty as a solid foundation and send an official request to us so that we would interrogate, we would hold a questioning of privy to some crimes, and our law enforcement are perfectly able to do this questioning and send the appropriate material. Moreover, we can meet you halfway, we can make another step. We can actually permit official representatives of the United States, including the members of this very commission headed by Mr. Mueller. We can let them into the country and they will be present for this questioning. But in this case, there's another condition. This kind of effort should be a mutual one. Then we would expect that the Americans would reciprocate and they would question officials, including the officers of law enforcement and intelligence services of the United States, whom we believe are, who have something to do with illegal actions on the territory of Russia. And we have to request the presence of our law enforcement. For instance, we can bring up Mr. Browder in this particular case. Business associates of Mr. Browder have earned over $1.5 billion in Russia. They never paid any taxes, neither in Russia nor in the United States. And yet the money escaped the country. They were transferred to the United States. They sent a huge amount of money, 400 million, as a contribution to the campaign of Hillary Clinton. Well, that's their personal case. It might have been legal, the contribution itself, but the way the money was earned was illegal. So we have a solid reason to believe that some intelligence officers accompanied and guided these transactions. So we have an interest of questioning them. That could be a first step, and we can also extend it. Options abound, and they all can be found in an appropriate legal framework.
Trump to win the election, and did you direct any of your officials to help him do that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because he talked about bringing the US-Russia relationship back to normal.
Продолжаем. Я думаю, вполне вопроса 3 может задать кто-то из российского пула.
I think there can be 3 questions from the Russian pool. Russia Today, you have the floor.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you so much.
Добрый вечер. Меня зовут
Good evening to everyone. My name is Ilya Petrenko,
телеканал RT.
RT
First
TV channel.
for Mr. Trump in English. Mr. President, would you please go into the details of possibly any specific arrangements for the U.S. to work together with Russia in Syria, if any of these kind of arrangements were made today or discussed? И если позволите, Владимир Владимирович, тоже вопрос на...
My question to President Putin in Russian. Since we brought up the issue of football several times, I used the football language. Mr. Pompeo mentioned that when we talk about the Syrian cooperation, the ball is in the Syrian court. Mr. Putin, in Russian court, is it true? And how would you use this fact, that having the ball?
Well, I guess I'll answer the first part of the question. We've worked with Israel long and hard for many years, many decades. I think we've never has anyone, any country been closer than we are. President Putin also is helping Israel, and we both spoke with Bibi Netanyahu, and they would like to do certain things with respect to Syria, having to do with the safety of Israel. So in that respect, we absolutely would like to work in order to help Israel, and Israel will be working with us. So both countries would work jointly. And I think that when you look at all of the progress that's been made in certain sections with the eradication of ISIS, we're about 98%, 99% there, and other things that have taken place that we've done, and that, frankly, Russia has helped us with in certain respects. But I think that working with Israel is a great thing, and creating safety for Israel is something that both President Putin and I would like to see very much. One little thing I might add to that is the helping of people, because you have such horrible, if you see, and I've seen reports and I've seen pictures, I've seen just about everything, and if we can do something to help the people of Syria get back into some form of shelter and on a humanitarian basis, and that's what the word was, really, a humanitarian basis. I think that both of us would be very interested in doing that, and we will do that. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, but for now, no specific agreements, for instance, between the militaries.
Well, our militaries do get along. In fact, our militaries actually have gotten along probably better than our political leaders for years, but our militaries do get along very well, and they do coordinate in Syria and other places. Okay? Thank you.
Мы говорили, я уже
Yes, we did mention this. We mentioned the humanitarian track of this issue. Yesterday I discussed this with French President Mr. Macron, and we reached an agreement that together with European countries, including France, we will step up this effort. On our behalf, we'll provide military cargo aircraft to deliver the humanitarian cargo. And today I brought up this issue with President Trump. I think there is plenty of things to look into. The crucial thing here is that a huge amount of refugees are in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in the states that border are adjacent to Syria. If we help them, the migratory pressure upon the European states will be decreased manifold. And I believe it's crucial from any point of view, from humanitarian point of view, from the point of view of helping people, helping the refugees. And in general, I agree, I concur with President Trump. Our military cooperate quite successfully together. They do get along, and I hope they will be able to do so in future. We will keep working in the Astana format, I mean Russia, Turkey, and Iran, which I informed President Trump about. But we do stand ready to link these efforts to the so-called small group of states, so that the process would be a broader one, it would be a multidimensional one, and so that we will be able to maximize our fighting chance to get the ultimate success in the issue of Syria. And speaking about having the ball in our court in Syria, President Trump has just mentioned that we've successfully concluded the World Football Cup. Speaking of the football, actually, Mr. President, I'll give this ball to you, and now the ball is in your court. All the more that the United States will host the World Cup in 2026.
That's right. Thank you very much. We do host it, and we hope we do as good a job. That's very nice. That will go to my son, Barron. We have no question. In fact, Melania, here you go. Okay.
The final question from the United States will go to Jonathan Lemire from the AP.
Thank you. Question for each president. President Trump, you first. Just now, President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Why haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying? With that being said, all I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server. But I have confidence in both parties. I really believe that this will probably go on for a while, but I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server. What happened to the servers of the Pakistani gentlemen that worked on the DNC? Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails, gone, just gone. I think in Russia they wouldn't be gone so easily. I think it's a disgrace that we can't get Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators with respect to the 12 people. I think that's an incredible offer. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add something to this. After all, I was an intelligence officer myself.
Знаю, как составляются соответствующие досье.
And I do know how dossiers are made out. Just a quote, just a second.
Это первое.
That's the first thing.
Второе.
Now the second thing.
Я считаю Россию демократическим государством.
I believe that Russia is a democratic state.
Не отказываете
And I hope you're not
своей стране,
denying
потому что это
this right to your own country. You're not denying that the United States is a democracy. Do you believe the United States is a democracy?
А если это так,
And if so,
то
if it is a democratic state,
или вывод
then the final conclusion in this kind of a dispute can only be delivered by a trial, by the court, not by the executive, by the law enforcement. For instance, the Concord company that was brought up is being accused. It's been accused of interference. But this company does not constitute the Russian state. It does not represent the Russian state. And I brought several examples before. Well, you have a lot of individuals in the United States, take Soros, for instance, with multi-billion capitals, but it doesn't make him his position, his posture, the posture of the United States. No, it does not. Well, it's the same case. There is the issue of trying a case in the court, and the final say is for the court to deliver. We are now talking about the private, the individuals, and not about particular states. And as far as the most recent allegation is concerned about the Russian intelligence officers, we do have an intergovernmental treaty. Please do send us the request. We will analyze it properly and we'll send a formal response. And as I said, we can extend this cooperation, but we should do it on a reciprocal basis, because we would await our Russian counterparts to provide us access to the persons of interest for us, who we believe can have something to do with the intelligence service. Let's discuss the specific issues and not use the Russia and the US relationship as a loose change for this internal political struggle.
A question for President Putin. Thank you. Two questions for you, sir. Can you tell me what President Trump may have indicated to you about officially recognizing Crimea as part of Russia? And then secondly, sir, does the Russian government have any compromising material on President Trump or his family?
President Trump and posture of President Trump on Crimea is well known, and he stands firmly by. He continued to maintain that it was illegal to annex it. Our viewpoint is different. We held a referendum in strict compliance with the UN Charter and the international legislation. For us, this issue, we put paid to this issue. And now to the compromising material. Yeah, I did heard these rumors that we allegedly collected compromising material on Mr. Trump when he was visiting Moscow. Well, distinguished colleague, let me tell you this. When President Trump visited Moscow back then, I didn't even know that he was in Moscow. I treat President Trump with utmost respect. But back then, when he was a private individual, a businessman, nobody informed me that he was in Moscow. But let's take St. Petersburg Economic Forum, for instance. There were over 500 American businessmen, the high-ranking, the high-level ones. I don't even remember the last names of each and every one of them. Well, do you remember, do you think that we try to collect compromising material on each and every single one of them? Well, it's difficult to imagine another nonsense of a bigger scale than this. Well, please, just disregard these issues and don't think about this anymore again.
And I have to say, if they had it, it would have been out long ago. And if anybody watched Peter Strzok testify over the last couple of days, and I was in Brussels watching it, it was a disgrace to the FBI, it was a disgrace to our country, and you would say that was a total witch hunt. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
An absolutely fascinating news conference featuring two superpower leaders, President Trump, President Putin, covering a lot of ground, but as we expected, a lot of the questioning had to do with Russian interference in the 2016 election, Vladimir Putin flatly denying it, at the same time acknowledging that he wanted Donald Trump to win the presidency. The other big headline here, and I'm going to go around the horn here in a moment, but the other big headline is the president's refusal to acknowledge the findings of U.S. intelligence agencies that there was a Russian move to interfere with the U.S. election, nor did he acknowledge the 12 indictments handed down against Russian intelligence officers, and suggesting that Russia had no reason to hack the U.S. election. Let me bring in now, if I can, Kristen Welker, our White House correspondent, Michael McFaul, ambassador, former Russian ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Russia. Let me, each of you, the headlines.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. The fact that President Putin said he did in fact want President Trump to win the election, but that at the same time denied that he had interfered in the election. He did respond to questions about those 12 individuals who were indicted on Friday. He said he would bring U.S. investigators to Russia to have them question the individuals. That is what it seemed like he was offering. Will that actually happen? We'll have to see. But Lester, the big moment for me was when President Trump was asked to flatly denounce Russian meddling and to say to Putin that it won't be tolerated, and he didn't do it. Instead, he again went back to those familiar talking points, blaming the Democrats, trying to shift the subject, talking about the fact that he ran this fantastic campaign and missed an opportunity to say this is not going to be tolerated. He also, the final point I'll make, when he was asked if he blamed Russia for anything, he said, effectively, there's plenty of blame to go around. It was a similar response to the one that we heard in the wake of the Charlottesville riot. So I think that those who are looking for President Trump to be very firm on the issue of Russian meddling did not hear what they wanted to today.
Ambassador McFaul.
I agree completely. It was easy. He could have hit it out of the park. He could have pushed back. He could have agreed with his own intelligence team. He had the opportunity to do it, and he decided not to. He obviously decided not to do that, and I was deeply disappointed by that. The other thing is there was no substance in the meeting. They just talked about lots of issues. All of the hints we'd heard about deliverables on this and that, maybe a breakthrough on arms control, none of that.
No agreement on Syria?
Nothing. There was no agreement. The only thing I heard was that they agreed to talk about a follow-on to the New START treaty. That's good news.
And a working group on cybersecurity and on business relationships. You smile.
Well, yeah, a working group on cybersecurity after what we know they did during our elections. And when I hear our president not willing to push back to defend our sovereignty against a hostile intervention in our elections, it makes me very nervous about any cybersecurity working group between our two countries.
Hallie Jackson was in the room. I want to go to her now. Hallie, the press corps was, the questions were very, very direct here. They hit to the heart of these questions. What was the feeling in the room as the president refused to blame Russia?
I'm going to think about how to characterize the feeling in the room, Lester. I think a fair word sworn in and have never been at a press conference like this one. Starting with what happened just moments before the First Lady and the rest of the U.S. delegation went in, all the way to watching the president side by side with Vladimir Putin. U.S. intelligence agencies have agreed leads the country that did interfere with the 2016 election, and President Trump, standing side by side with Vladimir Putin, simply did not condemn that. He seemed to put equal weight to his own leader of the Office of Director of National Intelligence, as well as Vladimir Putin, saying at one point, well, Dan Code says it was Russia, Vladimir Putin says it wasn't. He was strong and forceful in his denial. Vladimir Putin is an ex-KGB agent. Of course he was strong and forceful in his denial, Lester. He probably would not have been a great ex-spy if that was the case. So it was a moment that I think was certainly, it is going to define, based on my reporting and based on the analysis covering this administration, it is going to define much of what President Trump has done here in Russia, has done here in Finland, rather, with Russia, and has done here overseas. There were so many striking moments, including when President Putin seemed to acknowledge, and it was a little confusing in the question and answer session, but he basically was asked, did you want President Trump to win the election? Putin said, yeah, I did. Because he believed that he would reset, Donald Trump would reset U.S.-Russian relations. There was the what you might call both sidesism from Donald Trump. And then there was this remarkable, what seemed to be a deal put on the table from Vladimir Putin, where he said, sure, have the special counsel Bob Mueller come and talk with those 12 Russian operatives that the special counsel just indicted, but only if we get to go and talk with your U.S. agents about that as well. President Trump did not shoot that down. And so I think that this again, the word I keep coming back to, Lester, is extraordinary. There were, as we often sometimes see in these press conferences, reporters shouting questions. There were people trying to ask follow-up questions. The Russian media handlers didn't love that, so somebody else from Russia got a question. But truly a remarkable afternoon.
All right, Hallie Jackson, I want to bring in Pete Williams, our justice correspondent. Pete, you've been watching here. The president tried to deflect on this question of whether the Russians, moved to influence our election, and he did that by questioning these servers that are missing. What do we know about that?
Well, of course, the FBI did have access to Hillary Clinton's email server, and in fact said that they couldn't find conclusively whether there was any proof that any foreign government ever hacked into it. If you recall from his infamous news conference in July and then his subsequent testimony before Congress, the former FBI director said that there were suggestive signs that there was an attempt to hack into the email server that she had in their home in New York, but they could never conclusively tell whether it happened. But the question of whether that was the original server and whether it was replaced and what happened to it has been a continuing question that people who want to attack the FBI have raised. Of course, on the other question, Lester, there is no extradition treaty between the U.S. and Russia, and I think President Putin's offer to let Bob Mueller come over and talk to the Russian intelligence officials who were indicted on Friday is a pretty empty gesture.
And a follow-up question here. Was there anything in what the president said that might be of other interest to the Mueller investigation?
No, I can't think that it would be. I mean, I think basically he's pretty much stood by his consistent. I think that the issue for the president has always been that he somehow equates any investigation of foreign meddling in the U.S. election with questioning the legitimacy of the outcome. He can't distinguish those two.
All right, Pete, thanks. I want to go to Richard Engel right now, who is in Moscow, where they're, of course, paying very close attention to this. What's your read on what we just heard, Richard?
This is what the Russians have been waiting many, many years for, an ability to see their president talking with the American president as equal, the American president treating the Russian leader as an equal, with a whole host of problems in front of them, trying once again to solve the problems of the world stage. You saw President Trump giving a speech that seemed like it was right out of the Cold War, talking about putting diplomacy ahead of the risk of confrontation between superpowers, although there's no indication right now that there is a confrontation or a potential confrontation between superpowers. And then this very interesting back and forth that we've been talking about, why the president refuses to accept his intelligence agencies and takes the word instead of Vladimir Putin.
Richard Engel, both presidents sharing what they say they talked about. Keep in mind that their first 90 minutes, actually first 2 hours, was the two of them together with only translators. So we don't fully know exactly what was discussed and to what extent it was discussed. Then they moved into the larger working group, the working lunch meeting, in which various advisors and experts were there to get some sense of whether there were areas of agreement. But and as Ambassador McFaul, you had pointed out that highly unusual that you would have this kind of meeting without someone there taking copious notes.
Didn't happen when I was in the government. We always had somebody taking notes, and so there's a lot we don't know. They did read out some of it, right? They want to establish a couple of these working groups and this back and forth. Just to be clear about the back and forth about investigating what happened. It's called an MLAT. It's not an extradition treaty, but it is a legal assistance treaty. And we used it when I was ambassador, for instance, to interrogate family members and relatives of the Chechen terrorists during the Boston terrorist attack, right? So FBI agents came to Moscow and interviewed people. That's not sending them back. That's not giving them back, because there was another gentleman we were really interested in having sent back. That was Edward Snowden. And Mr. Putin, of course, was not going to go along with that.
So would you consider this an empty gesture or one that would not be fully fruitful?
You know, I think it's rather empty. I mean, he's not going to set those people down. He completely denies that they had anything to do with it. He tried to mess it all up by saying private individuals throwing Soros in there, like that they're not the government. Mr. Mueller was pretty clear. He said, give us some facts. Actually, Mr. Mueller gave quite a few facts on Friday, President Putin. Very specific facts. And these were government intelligence officers, not some random Russian hackers or private people like Mr. Soros.
I would just pick up on that point, and I know that President Trump said that, look, this didn't involve anyone in my campaign, and yet, Lester, we know that a number of individuals have been swept up, either indicted or have pleaded guilty, who were associated with his campaign. You have his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. You also have his former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, George Papadopoulos, just to name some of them. So a number of people who were connected to his campaign have been swept up in the Mueller probe. The president wants to put a fine point on this investigation, wants to say that it's over, there was no collusion. Everyone knows that, he said yet again moments ago in that press conference, and yet the reality is the Mueller probe isn't wrapped up yet.
Let me go back to Hallie, who was at the news conference. Hallie, a lot of discussion about the relationship before this meeting today. The president has said some things that have left many of the European allies befuddled before he got here, including that the EU is a foe. And this may be a question that's not appropriate for you to answer, but did you get the sense that these were two foes standing side by side, or two men that respect each other and really consider themselves nothing more than competitors?
They addressed that in a way, Lester, talking about the idea of competition between the two. I think the question of respect is an interesting one, particularly if you think about where President Putin is looking at President Trump. I do think that at this moment in time, President Trump, when you look at how European allies are feeling, is doing a lot of what Vladimir Putin would want to see by going to, for example, NATO and talking extremely tough there, talking very tough, blasting some of our closest allies in Europe. Even before that, for example, at the G7 in Quebec, Vladimir Putin has wanted to undercut NATO. He's worked toward that every day that he's been in office. And so President Trump going in and making these threats or talking about a warning to reassess U.S. involvement in NATO is significant in that point. And Lester, I do think, just to wrap up here, when you look at the idea of where the relationship is, the president said notably it was rock bottom. Now, today, as of 4 hours ago, that has changed.
All right, Hallie Jackson, thank you very much. The president saying the meeting went very well, but keep in mind that he really never set the bar, saying there were no expectations going forward. So that's something to consider as we consider what has happened here. But I think all would agree, an extraordinary, illuminating news conference from these two leaders after their meeting. We'll have full coverage when I see you on NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester Holt in Helsinki, NBC News. Good night.
Justin, I don't know. I mean, did you see her?